Okay, we are live on both Facebook and on the Zoom.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ashley. Hello, everyone. My name is Osprey Oriel Lake, and I am the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network WECAN. And I'm zooming in from COP28 in Dubai, where we've been for 2 weeks on the ground with our delegation, along with many, many civil society colleagues from all over the world. And we wanted to welcome you to this event, Global Voices, which is women-led calls to action in response to COP28. And it's about 7 o'clock here in Dubai. We've had another really long day. And yeah, we wanted to give an opportunity for a lot of the amazing women leaders that we've been in contact with here at COP28 to share some of our responses. The negotiations are not over. We've heard that it's very likely that the negotiations may go on for another day, 2, or even 3 days. We don't know. We've heard all different kinds of things. What we do know from today, just literally within the last hour, is the first text has come out. And needless to say, it is extraordinarily disappointing. We were really pushing hard for a strong statement on the fossil fuel phase out. That's what we're doing here. We've come here to insist that the fossil fuel phase out be center stage of this COP. Civil society has demanded it. It's been growing for years that we would come to this moment. And now it's here, and the first text is out, and it's quite weak, with a lot of quote unquote options for governments to choose what they want to do and not do. And nowhere near what we need to see in terms of ambition to keep us at the 1.5 degree guardrail. It also needs to be stated that there are over 2,400 lobbyists here from the fossil fuel industry, which has deeply influenced this COP. And we're just seeing oil deals going on in all the different rooms, and a huge influence of the fossil fuel industry here that has also led to this huge disappointment. That said, there has also been incredible work that has gone on here at this COP, enormous push on the Just Transition work program. There has been a lot of networking that has gone on with our movements that have grown ever stronger in our statements and our demands. And there's so much I could say, but I want to acknowledge that our colleague Zipporah Berman is here with us. She is the chair of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which WECAN is very honored to be on the steering committee of. And there's some really good news from what's happened with the Fossil Fuel Treaty, which I don't want to share because I want to hand the floor to Zipporah to share for the movement that is really fighting for this fossil fuel treaty and a real phase out and a mechanism to phase out fossil fuels, which is clearly desperately needed at this point, especially the poignancy of today with what we've learned about the text. And with that, I welcome you and thank you so much, Zipporah, for taking time with us to be with us this evening. I know you've had a very busy 2 weeks yourself. I'm glad we're both standing. It's a lot to say that we're both standing this evening, and I hand the floor to you to share with us any of your reflections of the last few weeks and where we stand today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Osprey. And actually right now, after just receiving this terrible text, the first text from the presidency on COP28, it's a relief. It's a relief to see all your faces and to be amongst community right now. Let me start with the big picture, because I've been coming to COPs now for 15 years. I'm working on climate change and environmental issues for about 30. And I think one thing that we need to hold on to, regardless of the outcome of these texts, is that after decades of climate negotiations, this is the first time that fossil fuels and a real conversation about phasing out fossil fuels has been dragged center stage into the climate negotiations. And it almost sounds crazy when we say it like that, because I think all of us here who are joining today or tonight, depending on where you are, we know that the climate crisis is a fossil fuel crisis. The fact is that 86% of the emissions trapped in our atmosphere today that come from three things: oil, gas, and coal. And the fact that fossil fuels have been invisible in these negotiations for so long, and we haven't seen strong climate policy to constrain the production of fossil fuels, is a result of the power of the fossil fuel industry and the fossil fuel lobby for so many years. And I think what I've been seeing over the last couple of years and really culminating at this COP is the growing power of movements around the world, standing with frontline communities who have been opposing these projects for decades, standing with indigenous communities who have been opposing fossil fuel projects, and coming together as a global movement to call for a phase out of fossil fuels. And we have forced this conversation into center stage in the climate negotiations, despite the strategy of the fossil fuel industry. We have created a conversation that every single country in the world has responded to here. And that's really important. And that will never, that we have shifted the conversation to such an extent that it cannot go backwards now. It's almost like we pulled back the curtain on fossil fuels. And that affects every part of the negotiations. It affects the loss and damage and equity issues, because we know that more fossil fuels equals more loss and damage. And we've been able to really show that and align and brief countries on the science that shows that. So I do think that is really exciting. And I think that so look, I'm tired. I feel like I've been here a month, not a couple of weeks. And today has been a month in and of itself. But I want to lump what we're seeing right now into kind of the good, the bad, and the truly ugly. And let's start with the ugly so we end up on the good. The truly ugly right now. We are seeing a number of countries pushing to try and make sure there is no mention of fossil fuels in the text. And in fact, we saw an unprecedented intervention by OPEC yesterday with a leaked letter where OPEC sent a letter to countries telling them to make sure that fossil fuels was not in the text. And what's interesting about that letter is they showed that what we're doing around the world is working. They said if fossil fuels are in the COP text, that will mean a tipping point, an irreversible change on the future of fossil fuels. They're right. Because renewables now are cheaper at scale, because we know that they're safer and cleaner and they're available. But yet our countries are on track right now to produce 110% more fossil fuels, more oil, gas, and coal between now and 2030 than can ever be burned if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees. And so that's the really ugly of really in this text, for example, that we just got, the global stocktake text from the presidency. There is no language on a full phase out of fossil fuels. I would say on the bad, there is some language on coal, unabated coal, but we need to phase out all fossil fuels, and we need countries to stop pretending they're climate leaders while expanding fossil fuel production. That means oil, gas, and coal. And we're not seeing that in this text. Also in the bad, I would say that instead of talking about 1.5 and the Paris Agreement commitments, the text, it is using the language of net zero. And, a report came out just last week here at COP that showed that we now have national net zero carbon targets from about 80 that cover about 88% of global emissions. Sounds great. Sounds like most countries are committing to net zero, except when those targets were analyzed, the net zero tracker shows that only 7% of those emissions are covered by any type of national commitment to phase out. So the term net zero has, even though net zero commitments are growing in number, the integrity is being challenged because they're having the term is not becoming a house for an impact to phase out and ramp down production. In fact, current global plans and productions would lead to around 240% more coal, 57% more oil, and 71% more gas that is consistent with 1.5. So we need to continue to push language of 1.5 in line with the science and the Paris Agreement, and not just net zero. And and then I would say on the good, What we saw on the floor of COP over the last couple of days was the majority of countries calling for language around phasing out fossil fuels, the majority of countries. So it's not over. And although there really is supposedly only one day left, this is a text proposed by the UAE president of COP. And now countries are starting to respond to it. And we already heard in a scrum just a couple of minutes ago from AOSIS countries, the small island states, and they said, this text is a death sentence for our countries. And so we're going to hear some really strong responses from countries, and it's not over. Because the text is a kind of word salad of loopholes to allow more fossil fuel production, and I think that we're going to hear a big pushback from a majority of countries. Also in the category of good, we walked into COP last year with one country, Vanuatu, endorsing the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, because even if we got strong text here at COP, that's text saying that we need a phase out. It's not a plan for a phase out. So the fossil fuel treaty provides that plan. It creates new mechanisms of international cooperation so that countries can cooperate to wind down the production of fossil fuels in a way that is fair and in a way that is financed. And here at COP, we've seen a swell of countries supporting that. We now, as of today, have 12 countries supporting the call for a fossil fuel treaty, and a number of countries that are fossil fuel producers, like Colombia and Timor-Leste. When Colombia joined, President Petro said, we're joining because we're a fossil fuel producing nation, because our economy is dependent on fossil fuel exports, and we know that every day we make the problem worse. Not just because of the climate, but also we dig a hole for ourselves economically, and we need international cooperation in order for our countries to be able to stop expanding fossil fuels. And that, their support, President Petro's support and Colombia's support for the treaty, the fossil fuel treaty, has really changed the game. So we're building a fossil fuel treaty. We're building it because people around the world are joining fossil fuel treaty, health groups, faith groups, institutions, 100 cities, the World Health Organization, the EU, California as a state has endorsed the fossil fuel treaty. This is a global movement that's calling for a real plan that is legally binding, that can help us wind down fossil fuels and put all of our money and our time into building the world that we want. And that tonight, Osprey, is what's giving me hope.
Oh, thank you so much, Zipporah, and also for your incredible leadership. And, I just want to say also one of the highlights of the last 2 weeks was being in the room when the president of Colombia spoke about the treaty, when he made his endorsement. And for those of you who may not be aware, there is a way to have access to the interpretation of that speech. And it's one of the most inspiring political speeches I've heard at a COP ever. I've been going for over 10 years, and it was a profound speech about the moment we are in with humanity and lifting up the fact that we must have a fossil fuel treaty, we must phase out fossil fuels. But it was poetic, elegant, and quite profound moment here at the COP. So congratulations for that achievement here, and all the other countries as well. And it's just really great to see you in this moment, Zipporah. And I'm sure I think we're just down the hall from each other, and I'm sure I'll see you in the next few days, because this COP is not over. This text has come out, as you said. It's a terrible text, and I think we're going to see a real fight in the next days and probably be here for days. But I wish you all the best. I thank you for taking time with us and highlighting all the points that you have. And I'm going to let you go and get some dinner or whatever you're getting into next. And I'll be seeing you soon, but I really appreciate you taking time with us. Thank you so much, and best wishes.
Thank you so much, Osprey. And one last thing before I go, I don't know, I'm so tired. I don't think I talked about net zero, but I didn't talk about the term unabated. And I just want people listening to know that that term, unabated, is a loophole for the fossil fuel industry to say that they can continue to expand production while abating the emissions from their production. And it's not working. And this year, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, and the Energy Transition Commission, and the IPCC all acknowledged that carbon capture and storage is not working to abate fossil fuel production emissions, and that we can't rely on those technologies, and they downgraded their projections. So the fact that we're seeing this term unabated come into the text right now, again, is a loophole being pushed by the fossil fuel industry, and people should be wary of that, not just in the international negotiations, but also at home in their countries, in national policy. Don't accept it. There's a lot of science behind the idea that you can't rely on abating new production. We need absolute emission and production decline of fossil fuels if we're going to keep more of the world safe. So keep a lookout for that. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Zipporah. Have a good evening. I'm going back to you, Ashley, to learn if we have Rochetta with us.
We don't have Rochetta on the line just yet, but we do have Crystal Cavalier who's ready to speak.
Okay, great. Well, let me just make a few transition comments, Crystal, and then we'll bring you on. I wanted to mention that this unabated word is very, very critical, as Zipporah was saying, because everywhere there's an opportunity for the fossil fuel industry and governments that are supporting the fossil fuel industry to continue business as usual is always their choice. And that's what we're seeing in this text that has come out tonight, is a real push for business as usual, wanting to continue with the same energy systems that we have. And we absolutely know we need a phase out completely of fossil fuels. And so this text, even though those of you who may not be following policy at this level, it doesn't need to, you don't need to be an expert to understand that we can't be continuing to burn oil, gas, and coal and expect this problem to go away. And this is why the people's movements have been protesting all week here, and why tonight actually there was a spontaneous action after this text came out, because people's lives are on the line. This is like every time we have one of these COPs, it's a final moment for us to turn the corner and put fossil fuels in the rear view mirror. We've got to move beyond them. Countries know this, but we have to remember that wealthy countries and countries with outsized power continue to really infiltrate the system and also continue to interfere with what needs to happen. And so that's a lot of the anger and frustration that is happening right now here at the COP by civil society, is that a small group of wealthy countries are really interfering with this transition that we all know we need to take into clean, renewable energy, and that we cannot continue to harm frontline communities, especially Indigenous, Black, and Brown communities, who suffer the worst in what we call sacrifice zones and sacrifice areas, because there is definitely a racial lens to where the harms happen first and worst in the global South and in frontline communities in the global North. And we do not accept that the wealthy countries and the role of the fossil fuel industry and how much influence it has here to continue to avoid what we all know needs to happen, and to honor a climate justice framework that really puts justice at the center of the conversation. And with that, I'm really honored to give the floor over to Crystal Cavalier, who's the executive director of 7 Directions. I'm really excited to have her be here with us, because she is one of the most incredible frontline leaders that I know, who's here to speak out for her community and to ensure that her voice and her community's voice is heard. And I'd like to hand the floor over to you, Crystal. Thank you so much for taking time with us on your busy evening.
Thank you so much, Osprey and Ashley, for having me here in WECAN. And I'm really excited to be here. This is our first COP ever at 7 Directions of Service. And, I can feel it in my bones that these oil, gas, and coal companies, they're coming for us on the front lines. And my whole overall experience has been a pretty good one, but I am very saddened to learn that, they remove the phrase, phase out fossil fuels. I think I heard someone say they suggested something that's called reduce, but we need to say phase out completely, because we know this year has been the hottest year ever, since, I don't know, the world, since humans have been here. And it's really concerning that, you know, at this summit, these countries, I believe it's 194, they must agree or there's no deal. And so, you know, us humans or two-leggeds, we're burning fossil fuels, is driving global warming, you know, risking millions of lives. And, you know, here, I came specifically to talk about the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate extension, about how that fossil fuel company is just so greedy, and it just will continue at anything. And it's very triggering. You know, I feel like it is happening. You know, it happened to my ancestors, and I feel like it's happening all over again. And these fossil fuel companies and corporate greed, you know, it's just something, you know, I really feel for my babies, my children, and, you know, I feel it for my peoples. And, you know, I had a really good time doing our actions yesterday, and then speaking about eco grief and how it affects us. But I really do believe that this COP president and these oil producing countries that we're having this climate change conference at, you know, I don't quite understand how they're going to push it forward, because they're ultimately pushing fossil fuels. And so just disappointed with the COP president, because he did come to our Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and, you know, he said he heard our voices, but, you know, what we're hearing now, he's not really hearing our voices at all. And we really have to phase out fossil fuels. So that is so important that people stick to that. And I know we have some of our negotiators in there, you know, trying to get this back in. And yeah, I'm really hoping, I'm having positive thoughts. I'm going to send everybody positive thoughts that we're going to get these negotiations on, and the deal will be sealed, and we'll have, you know, something that we can be proud of, and help phase out fossil fuels, because it's real important. If we don't, we will cease to exist. So thanks, Osprey, for letting me speak, and turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Crystal, and, you know, making the effort to come here and have your voice heard. And even if the presidency's not listening to you, we're here to support your community and to continue to fight alongside with you in solidarity. And thank you so much for making the long journey. And, you know, it takes a lot of effort and energy to be here in these spaces. And I just wanted to thank you for being here, and we hear you and support you. Have a good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So those of you who are just tuning in, we are here at COP28, just recording live and zooming in and connecting with some of the women leaders that we've been working with all week here at the COP. And so this is a very free-flowing conversation as people have time to jump on with us, because we felt it was important just to have a rather spontaneous event, not like our traditional sort of webinars that we do at WECAN that are very planned panels. I just wanted to have sort of a raw conversation with our network to share what is going on. Ashley, if someone's here, we'll hand the floor to them. If not, I have a report I wanted to share.
We have Jackie Patterson on the line.
All right, great. Let's bring Jackie in, and then I'll go to the report. So let me introduce Jackie Patterson, a dear friend and colleague. She is the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project. And she has also been here the whole time at the COP. I'm very glad I got to see one of her amazing panels. And also we were able to collaborate on a press conference, which Ashley can put in the chat, and maybe give the link, Ashley, to some of the events that we've been doing just for people, so they have access to that. But Jackie's doing tremendous work at her organization and has put out enormous expertise at this COP. And I'm so glad, Jackie, to have this time with you, and thank you for taking the time in this really, really busy time at the end of a very long day after many, many, many days. I hand the floor to you just to share any reflections you want. We know the text just came out, you know, reflections from the last few weeks, and anything else you want to share with us and our global network. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you as always, and thank you for putting together. I look forward to hearing all the amazing women who will be speaking as well. So yes, I I think about kind of sitting here with the privilege of having the resources of being here in Dubai, and I also think about what would the communities I work with, other than the folks who we have with us, but what would the communities who aren't able to come say, and what would they see if they sat in the walls of these meeting rooms, and what would they say if they were given the mic, and what would they do even if they were given the decision-making power? So this is the reflection that I've been having as I think about these last couple of weeks of almost kind of a surreal kind of situation being here and being in these conversations, even though it's my, I don't know, 13th COP. So as I think about my sisters in the United States, I think about a person like Sandra, who lives in a community in hurricane ravaged Louisiana, that her community is ravaged by disaster after disaster, and her relatives have been unearthed from their graves after the most recent disaster, and they're actually, the remains are sitting in trailers outside of her community because they haven't, the powers that be haven't found a way to put those remains back to rest again. And so she sits with the haunting notion that the bones of her relatives are sitting piled up in a trailer right outside of her community. And when I think about Sister Sandra in that situation, I wonder what she would think when she hears that there are nations that are responsible for climate change that are actively blocking action on loss and damage. I wonder what she would do if she had the voting power to make a different decision on what people are making here, where they're more at the behest of the polluters than they are of community. I think about Bessie in Alaska, and think about when she hears about the inaction on adaptation, and she knows that her comrades are having to adjust to a whole nother way of life because of the impacts of climate change on fisheries. And I wonder what she would say if she was allowed to speak. I think about Tina in Delaware, and of Martha in North Carolina, and I wonder what they are in communities. I hope you can hear me. It says my internet is unstable. You can hear me still?
Everything's
Hopefully.
perfect.
Okay,
We
good.
hear you.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. They both live in communities that are besieged by fossil fuel every day, all day. These sisters have buried neighbors and family members and friends. And soon after I visited Martha in North Carolina. She was coughing the entire time that I was with her. And I found out that after her work that she had been doing on like she actually went door to door to surveil, to take notes about the health conditions of her neighbors, because she saw the impact of the coal-fired power plant that they live near her, on their health and well-being, and at the same time as a community that's also ravaged by the hurricanes that come up the Atlantic seaboard. Anyway, after she was complaining of her own health, literally weeks after I visited her, I found out that she herself had passed away. And so these are the kinds of stories that haunt me as I sit here and I hear about people refusing to phase out fossil fuels, the single act that we know would save us. And I think about what people would think if they heard the US's contribution to climate finance was $17 million. It's almost like there was a passive aggressive, like somebody who puts a penny in a tip jar. Like it's like how is that even, something that they are calling a serious thing when one disaster in one city in the United States cost more than $17 million. And so it's just appalling, given that the U.S. is 4% of the global population and 25% of the emissions that drive climate change. And speaking of, I wonder what Fatima would feel when she heard what we all heard on December 8th, that our government, to whom they paid taxes, she and her family paid taxes for years. The country flies a flag to whom they pledged allegiance, but knowing that our country voted against a ceasefire, therefore consigning their relatives to increased suffering at best and certain death at worst. So And then finally, I wonder what the friends who live in the petrochemical corridors again, who are dealing with the asthma, who are dealing with the other respiratory illnesses and so forth, what would they think if they knew about the carbon markets in Article 6, and that the decision makers are really literally playing a shell game with their lives? And so we know that there's 12.2 billion hectares of biologically productive land and water on this earth. And if we divide that by the number of people alive, that's 1.6 global hectares per person, which is like 2.5 acres. For every single person from day old babies and upwards, that means that there's a place for every single one of us, and that the earth in its regenerative bounty was designed to provide for each of us. Yet those who are entrusted with decision making to preserve planet and people are being derelict in their responsibility to make the right choices. And therefore they're threatening the habitats of flora, fauna, and all animals and human beings. But in this world of abundance, we know we can all have a safe, secure, and healthy place to call home. Yet greed, avarice is the only thing that stands between this and a thriving planet and a home for all of us. Instead, we have people being forced from home, whether it's from war or disaster. So I'd like to bring us out of head for a moment as I close up my 6 minutes into heart with an excerpt from a poem from Warshan Shire, a Kenyan-born Somali poet. The poem is called Home, and it says, "You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, save, be hunger, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important." So I'll leave us there because I'm not sure if that was 6 minutes or not, but thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. What a beautiful poem, Jackie. And thank you for all the hard work that you've done here. And I love you just sharing the reflections on, the different voices and how they would respond to really this crisis moment that's happened here at the COP. And we're at a crisis point at the COP. Let's just face it. We just hit the wall.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to happen, and we hit the wall tonight where, I would say this is a giant like gladiator clash, if you will, of civil society and these fossil fuel industry, greedy, wealthy, white supremacist leaders. Let's just face it. And it's really devastating because we can easily see how these negotiators and country leaders don't put a face on the impacted communities. And so I really love that you shared all the different voices and what they might be saying, because it's as if people aren't even a part of this. Like, it's all about, industry surviving and business as usual surviving. And where are the people that are being impacted? And I'm also really glad that you brought up, the fact of the veto of the ceasefire by the United States is outrageous, on top of the United States also being one of the, being right now the largest fossil fuel producer. And we are really needing to push back, and we're going to see countries push back because they're seeing this text as a death sentence, as we said earlier by Zipporah, but also, we're going to hear more and more from countries, how bad this text is, because their countries are going to go underwater, where people are dying now. And I think it's very important that we continue to bring in the human rights component, the indigenous rights component, the frontline community voices, because clearly the leadership here is not listening to the people. And that it's devastating to see that level of uncaring. I think one of the shocks that we're all experiencing is it's hard to imagine this lack of care. Whether it's what is going on in Palestine, whether it's with the climate crisis, the absolute lack of humanity, I think, has been shocking for all of us. I mean, of course we experience it, but at this level of intensity, it's been I think, very, very hard on all of us who's been at this COP. So thank you so much for taking time with us. If you have any closing comment, please do, and we'll let you go have your evening.
No, I just appreciate being with you as well. looking forward to hearing others as they speak as well. So thank you.
Okay. So much, Jack. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Ashley, can you help me out here a little bit if someone else has come on or?
Yep, this is probably a good time to share the report if you wanted to do that. And then we have Casey on the line. I think she is getting herself ready here and working out audio.
We're
Casey,
here. Can you hear us?
Oh, we can-
Yes.
Great.
Okay,
Hi,
great. Well,
Ashley.
Hi.
let's go ahead and let Casey come online, and then I'll go ahead and share a little bit about some contextualizing of what we're seeing here with the current state of affairs. But I know Casey's also leaving this evening, so I don't want to keep her long. And I'm really glad that you could join us. Casey is part of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network delegation. We've been together for days, and it's been just such an honor to have this time with her. Casey Kapornik is from the Ponca Nation. She's the environmental ambassador to the Ponca Nation, and we're very honored to have her on our board at WECAN. And she has shared her voice in many, many spaces at this COP, from side events, high-level events, to actions, to press conferences. Literally, we cannot walk down the halls without being stopped and people wanting to speak with her. Her presence has really uplifted the civil society movements here, and it's such an honor to be here with you, Casey. And thank you for taking time, even though you're heading out this evening, that you've taken time to be on this broadcast with us. And I'd love to hand the floor to you for any reflections or thoughts you have from this evening and your time at the COP.
Thank you, as always. Thank you to WECAN and Osprey and Catherine. I just absolutely loved all the time we had together. The funny stuff, the reflections, the teamwork to be able to walk into those spaces informed and ready to share. It has been really one of those, I guess we should be used to it, but it was full of power and really wonderful gatherings around all of the different people who were able to be there with us in civil society. So many different constituencies and so many global people, all with the same feeling. Many indigenous, which really made me feel more comfortable and more excited, because I know when I first started going to these COPs gatherings, there really wasn't as many indigenous people or organizations, and many came with WECAN. So we had these incredible panels as well as incredible press conferences, and had so many people coming up afterwards saying that was my favorite one. Of all the ones I've gone to, this was most powerful and most inspiring. Today, we got to meet with Mary Robinson, which was pretty exciting for me. She, as I've been told, is on the Council of Elders that was made, and I'm not sure it's comprised of, but it was brainstormed with Nelson Mandela. And it felt really good to sit in the women gender area and be able to talk to her about the issues that we've held dear to our hearts and how they might be translated into policy at the UN level. So civil society was powerful. Civil society had a lot to say, so many answers, so much science, so much information, so much heart, and coming into those spaces, telling the stories from their homelands and from their experiences. On the other hand, for all of the excitement coming into COPs, having it held here was on one hand an extraordinary experience, and on the other hand, so much more of the same. You know, we had many, many more of the fossil fuel people that were here than have ever been present. And that was disheartening. And at the same time, You know, I've been told in the past that it's good to know with whom you're dealing. So we did know the color of the flavor that was coming at us and what it was going to be. At the same time, the answers were so powerful and undeniable that I was a bit taken aback by the stripping of certain things that I thought would at least be considered in the negotiations. I always come into these believing the best in people and walking away shaking my head at the greed and frankly at the lack of accountability that these so-called leaders have for their countries, for their country people, and for life on earth itself.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Casey. I mean, we were just talking earlier before you came on, and just like the lack of humanity is so shocking at some level, that with all the voices of the people sharing their struggles and the harms to their communities, that there are other humans who actually can walk away and disassociate themselves from that level of harm is startling.
It
As a
is.
speech. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am so glad that we had this time together, Casey, and I really appreciate you being with us for sharing your reflections. We're going to continue on here for the next days. We're seeing a lot of pushback on the text that has come out. And so I think it's going to be at least another day or two or even 3 before there's any kind of outcome from this COP, because I think, you know, it's really been civil society that has forced fossil fuels to be the conversation at this COP. And so we're really seeing, you know, this, what this is all really shaking out to be. You know, this is the conversation. Now it's here on the table for all to see in clear daylight. And yeah, we're not going to back down, and we're not walking away. We're going to just stand here and you know, I think there's going to be some actions here tonight, right outside the plenaries where the negotiations are going on. And people are planning to stay here all night and, you know, keep negotiators pushing hard for the phase out that we demand. But thank you so much. And I give you the floor if you have any final words, and we'll let you go to your packing and the things you need to do to get ready to go home.
Thank you. I think what I'm taking away is a lot more information. I think that there was so much sharing about the false solutions, about the ideas of just transition and what it should look like and what it will look like ultimately, and the manner in which we need to address all of the issues, including, you know, for me, the carbon trading, carbon sequestration, all of those silly ways of thinking that they're going to deal with the extractive industry. I mean, why aren't we stopping it at the source instead of finding these ways to continue it by saying, oh, well, we can continue, but we'll do this. And thank you, Osprey, for bringing up, you know, the real zero as opposed to net zero, and continuing to bring FPIC into every conversation. You know, if we have free, prior, and informed consent, and we say no, somebody should listen. Why are we still having the text about indigenous peoples, about Mother Earth, and the other very important things immediately pulled out of the text before there's even a chance for them to be part of the negotiations? And it also has really inspired me to organize more, to work harder, to inform more people, to, you know, civil society is the answer, period. And thank you for everything everyone's doing. Appreciate all the prayers, and safe journeys to all.
Thank you so much, and good journeys to you, Casey. And we'll be in touch soon. Much love to you. So thank you so much for being with us, Casey. And Ashley, I'd love to find out from you if anyone else is online, or I'm going to share a little bit about our net zero report.
This is a great time to do the net zero
Okay.
report.
So as Casey and I were talking about, you know, one of the things that's very interesting, and also Zipporah brought it up earlier, is that we need to be talking about keeping at 1.5 degree guardrail. That's the language that we need to continue to push for, and not only moving the text to talking about net zero. On top of that, we're very concerned, and when we came into this COP, you know, we knew, as WECAN and all, you know, all of our colleagues, that it's very critical to address false solutions in this crisis, including dangerous or unproven techno fixes, carbon offset schemes that don't work, and net zero pledges that delay immediate action, amongst others. And so we came into this COP with a report that I'm really excited about, that WECAN produced. I don't know if you can see it there. And it's called The Need for Real Zero, Not Net Zero, Shifting from False Solutions to Real Solutions in a Just Transition. And it goes into a lot of detail. This is on our website for those of you who would be interested. And it's really important that people are clear that when we hear about net zero and companies going net zero or governments demanding net zero by this or that date, it's critical to understand that net zero is a greenwashing smokescreen. Net zero is not what we need. It can kick the can down the road. Net zero as a scientific concept is correct, but it's been co-opted. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about things like carbon offset schemes, where, as an example, a fossil fuel company, an oil company can buy carbon credits in a forest somewhere else, often where indigenous people or local communities live. They can offset the pollution that they're doing and buy carbon offsets, which means they don't have to stop extracting or expanding fossil fuels, and they can continue to pollute. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is not actually reducing carbon emissions. It's actually continuing this process, because now you're just pushing this off into forests that are already sequestering carbon. This didn't suddenly create new carbon sequestration. And so this is what is being, used in these net zero pledges. On top of that, Vera, which is a company that has been one of the monitoring companies to monitor how the carbon offset programs have been working, came out earlier this year and literally said that 90% of the carbon offsets were phantom credits. They weren't even real. So this is a gigantic problem, because not only are we up against not having this fossil fuel phase out, but even the methodology of how we're going to move from the current system that we're in and get off of fossil fuels, and how we're going to reduce carbon emissions, is under these different methodologies that have to be interrogated, because they're not even working, what we call false solutions or geoengineering or carbon capture and storage. I don't want to get too technical with everyone, but people need to start getting familiar with this language, because people can actually believe that governments have solutions, that industry has solutions, and that somehow we just need to move forward on these net zero pledges and it's going to take us to where we need to go. When in fact, the general narrative around these net zero pledges and carbon offset schemes and CCS completely don't work. They are false solutions. And so that's also another intervention that we really need to have, is not only do we need to get a phase out, we also need to actually look at real solutions. And what do I mean by that? Community-led solutions, looking at different economies. We put out reports during this COP on prioritizing care work and how it can unlock a just transition for all, with different case studies that show how you can, we should be decarbonizing our economies through looking at the care economy, meaning the paid or underpaid labor of women, and how if you begin to pay women properly and recognize care work, this can bring in a very different economic framework. We can look at Buen Vivir from indigenous peoples about living well and in harmony with nature and not consuming so much. We can look at different types of economies, like from Bhutan, the happiness indicator, and not looking at GDP as our only way of looking at our economies. So we need a much broader conversation. We need to be much broader in our imagination and not locked into just carbon emission reductions. This is not the conversation we need to be having. We need to be having a much broader conversation about community-led solutions. How do we get renewables? How do we fund the global south to make the transition? How do the wealthy countries really deal with loss and damage? How can we move to food sovereignty and food security and be led by frontline communities and indigenous peoples in their relationship to the land and their own systems of renewable resources? And there are solutions. There are so many solutions, but that we have to stop the harm so that we can allow these solutions to really flourish. And that's why we're here fighting, so that we can have the space to do the people's work that is at hand, that are solutions to a lot of these just horrific problems that the world is facing. But it means that we also have to have governments quit interfering with the work that needs to happen. Anyway, I would like to find out from you, Ashley, if there's another speaker with us. I'm sorry, we're sort of I'm doing the guerrilla version of a live stream here just on my iPhone, so I don't really have access to other information. So I'm very glad to be co-hosting this with Ashley Guardado, who is on our WECAN team, and she's doing great support here to help me understand who's with us online.
Thank you, Osprey. As we learned last year, there are many difficulties for speakers to get on the line as they are trying to find space and good internet. So at the moment, we don't have our next speaker on the line. So if you have some other comments you would like to make, I welcome that. But at the moment, we don't have another speaker.
Absolutely. What I wanted to do is also, and you can just interrupt when someone joins, Ashley. And thank you, everyone who's listening. I mean, we were saying earlier we wanted to do just like a raw live stream while we're here with some of the women that we've been working with all week. We're in the final days of COP28 here in Dubai. And I just wanted to contextualize some of the urgency at the moment as well, because since the signing of the Paris Agreement, the world's 60 largest private banks have provided $5.5 trillion in financing to the fossil fuel industry. So even though we're here advocating with governments, it also is important to understand not only is the fossil fuel industry here, but also financial institutions. And we're really demanding from them that they also divest from fossil fuel, and also what are their phase out plans? What is the finance industry going to do? What are financial institutions going to do to move their money out of the fossil fuel industry and into clean renewable energy, into community-led solutions? Because tremendous funding is needed to make this transition. The funds have to be there. And that's why you'll hear in a lot of these report outs, and you'll see over the next weeks, that the demand has been for a fast, fair, final, funded, feminist phase out. And that has what has been a big demand here at the top, that it's really something that every sector of society has to get involved in. Industry, financial institutions, the private sector, everyone has to be engaged in this transition. The other thing is that recently a report by the UN Environment Program found that governments still plan to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than what would be consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. Okay, so already before we even began this COP, we're at double numbers that we need to be to stay at the 1.5 degree guardrail. So that's the other reason there has been such an outcry this evening with the text, is we already came into the COP knowing that we needed a radical transformation, that we needed governments to really be ambitious. And let's face it, not all governments are on the same page. There are the small island nations. There are a lot of different countries here pushing hard for a phase out. Countries that from the global south are being harmed the worst, who have contributed the least to the carbon emissions that are in the atmosphere right now. And they have huge work to do. So when we talk about the negotiators, let's remember that there's a lot of powerful negotiators who are doing the best they can to push back against the wealthy countries and against this takeover by the fossil fuel industry that's here. So we really need to be thinking of them tonight. I'm sure the negotiations are going to go into the wee hours of the morning. And we're going to see a real fight on our hands here, as it should be. This is a life and death moment. Let's not shy away from calling it out for what it is. So anyways, Ashley, maybe you could help me out here and let me know if we have anyone else who has joined us. Or if you can let me know if they're trying to join us.
Yes, we have one other speaker who's trying to join. And in this moment, if you would like, we have our very own Catherine Quaid, who could talk about the Feminist Green New Deal report, or sorry, what's been going on with the Feminist Green New Deal.
Yeah, that would be, thank you, Catherine. I'd love to have you join us. And just to say before I bring on Catherine Quaid, who is our communications coordinator at the Women's Within Climate Action Network. She has done a terrific job just running so hard and working so hard over the last few weeks. And I'm really glad that she's going to be able to report on the Feminist Green New Deal and what we've been doing with the coalition since we've been here. And also to say that at WECAN, we're going to be, as we do every year, producing a formal report out blog that will be our full analysis of all the work that we've done. You can see if you go to Instagram or Facebook, all of our different live streams, the actions we've participated in, our side events, our press conferences, our high level events. This night is really not our formal report out. It's just a raw sharing of our experience so far. We're not even done with the COP yet, so far at the COP. And I'm really glad to hear from you, Catherine Quaid. Please take the floor. Thank you for joining us.
She is just connecting her video.
Okay.
I will let you know when she's here.
Okay.
Probably another minute. Thank you everyone for your patience and flexibility. She's here, checking audio.
Hey, Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes, we can see. Did you hear the introduction I gave you or no?
I didn't. Sorry, I missed it.
Well, hopefully your ears were ringing. I was just complimenting the work that you've done all week here. And, being our communications coordinator here at the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. And we've been talking about, just this really intense moment of the text coming out and our reaction to that. And also the fact that we're going to be sharing a formal report back next week. But this is more just a raw moment of sharing live streaming here from the COP as we continue on with the negotiations. And also, really glad to hear from you, anything that you'd like to share, and also about anything from the Feminist Coalition on a Green New Deal, anything that you wanted to share on that. But in general, any reflections that you have at this point would be wonderful to hear. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thanks so much, Osprey. And thanks, Ashley, and the rest of the team for helping organize us all into this kind of global report back. I really appreciate it. And I think most top of mind, I was just reading the AOSIS statement on the draft text right now. And, they're powerfully saying we will not compromise 1.5. We will hold the line on 1.5. We will hold the line on fossil fuel phase out. And I think it's just, we had a press conference yesterday where Brianna Fruian, a youth climate activist from Samoa, spoke. And she was really giving, talking about the powerful negotiators and leaders in the Pacific region, in the island states. And so just to see this statement come out, I think, it's very powerful to see that we collectively as civil society can, join hands with AOSIS, with other countries who are hearing these calls for fossil fuel phase out, and really and understand, right, as countries very vulnerable to climate impacts, exactly how that is impacting us, how that's impacting their countries, and really what the need is to have a bold statement on a fossil fuel phase out right now, and to not compromise our lives, essentially their lives as countries, our lives as people who are impacted by climate change. And so I just was reading through that right before I joined, and it was very powerful, in these kind of last minute negotiations where maybe some countries can be negotiated into other situations, that they're saying no to that, and they're really demonstrating their leadership in this moment. So I feel, just excited to kind of follow the other country leaders who are really in these negotiating spaces. I don't know, Osprey, if you talked about sort of how civil society has been shut out in some of these last minute negotiations. And so it's good to hear about how countries are just continuing to push forward with fossil fuel phase out when civil society isn't really allowed in the room right now. And then in terms of the Feminist Green New Deal Coalition, which WECAN has been a Kickstart organization. We've been very involved since 2019. We always come to COP bringing, this feminist policy analysis, really considering how do we have a feminist policy. And while we were at COP, we hosted a press conference, bringing US leaders together on sharing what international climate policy looks like through a feminist lens. We also hosted a dialogue with global leaders at the Women and Gender Constituency Pavilion, thinking about, what does a feminist energy just transition look like? And I think overall, actually, we've seen this, in our civil society spaces, feminist is a word that's coming forward when we're talking about a fossil fuel phase out. Right before we left COP today, we were saying fair, funded, feminist, forever. And so just to see that collective coming together around that terminology and bridging together human rights, gender justice, indigenous rights. I think, our civil society spaces are getting stronger. We are supporting each other. We are becoming more pointed and aligned. And we can really see the power of that in how we put fossil fuel phase out on a table today, how we did that for COP. That's a lot of organizing that's been happening, and it was very strategic and, that in itself is a sense of success for civil society. We did that. We brought that here. And now they can't not talk about it, right? So I think there's just a lot of wonderful successes. And as the comms person, we will be writing a report back. We'll have resources and recordings of all these great press releases, our press conferences, in case you missed them. So just look for those soon.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your leadership and all the hard work. Oh my goodness, people have no idea. It's a huge campus here at this space. And so we've probably walked about 500 miles, I think, in the last 2 weeks. It feels like it. So thank you for your hard work and all of your thoughts and the effort that you've put out. And I think it's also really important to say, Catherine was mentioning it, which is there have been different tracks, as an example, with the Article 6, which has to do with market and non-market-based mechanisms, where there was a whole day where civil society wasn't even allowed into the negotiating rooms. And we think that this is very unfair and unjust. I mean, these are our futures that are being discussed, and we should be allowed as observers into these spaces and into these rooms, be able to have interventions, or certainly at the very least be able to hear what is being discussed. And so it's been difficult. It's been really difficult to work with ensuring that not only our voices are heard, but that we can actually be able to participate in this process in a just manner. So yeah, I think it's very important that you brought up that point. And thank you so much. And I know that you have a full evening ahead, but I really appreciate you jumping on, and I'll be seeing you very soon. Thank you so much for all your comments. Bye.
Thank you, Catherine. Osprey, we have Leanne with us on the line. Thank you, Leanne, for joining us a bit early.
Thank you, Leanne. I want to introduce Leanne, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I was just saying we're sort of in a very raw live stream situation here, not like one of our formal webinars. And please go ahead and introduce yourself. And I really wanted you to come on, Leanne, because you have done such a great job of following specific elements of the negotiations, and it would be really great to hear from you about that. And also we've been discussing for the last half hour or so here about the text coming out, our reaction to it. So anything you want to share from the last few weeks would be wonderful, and what you've been following the negotiations, and also just what this moment means to you. I mean, the COP is not over. The negotiations are in a very critical crisis moment right now, as you know. And so any thoughts are very welcome, and really appreciate you taking time with us. I know it's a very exhausting day and you've been working really late at night. And so we thank you for being with us and for your particular expertise, which we so much respect and honor. Please go ahead, Leanne, and introduce yourself and share with us any of your reflections.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Liane Schalatek. I'm working with an organization called the Heinrich Böll Foundation. I'm in the Washington, D.C. office. The Heinrich Böll Foundation is a German political foundation. Again, I'm in the Washington, D.C. office, where I focus largely on climate finance and international climate policy. Have done that for the last, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years, probably way too long for my sanity and the sanity of everybody that I'm working with. Here, I obviously followed a lot of all of the climate finance discussions to the extent that I could. We know that climate finance is really what will make, or in that case, potentially break the COP28 discourses, because all of the ambition on an energy packet and a renewable energy package, tripling renewable energies, doubling energy efficiency, scaling that all up, is very much dependent on providing the means of implementation. And we heard throughout the COP and from developing countries that, and this sentiment is actually shared by us developed country or civil society observers, that this is really not necessarily an ambition gap that we are seeing in many instances, but it's a means of implementation gap. And means of implementation refers to finance, capacity building, and technology. And so, you know, when all of us are coming now online a little bit convoluted, that's because we have been looking at the text that is coming out, the global stocktake text, and seeing how finance is reflected there. And I have to say, just looking at the text and acknowledging that that is not the end game. So there might very well be another text iteration of the global stocktake text. But what is in there is definitely way too weak to give confidence to developing countries and also the global community at large, that the financial support that as a matter of climate justice has to continue to be provided and significantly scaled up by developed countries, and including in particularly in the form of public finance and grant-based finance is there to support developing countries in their ambition. So we see a lot of, in the global stocktake text, a lot of acknowledgement and iteration of the fact that there isn't enough finance available, but actually no strong commitment to scaling up finance. There are some very general references. For example, there is quite a bit of reiteration on the promised goal of the doubling of adaptation finance between 2019 and 2025. But this is actually way too little to give the confidence, you know, to actually have the support that is needed for ambitious measures under the global goal on adaptation, right? So so we need to see obviously quite a bit more than we are currently seeing. There's also as of yet quite a bit of effort on diluting the responsibility of developed countries to provide climate finance, with references particularly to Article 2.1c, which is the reference to making climate finance overall, sorry, not climate finance, all financial flows consistent with the goals of the Paris Agreement. any effort to actually discuss finance in the broader context. And we obviously need to scale down or end fossil fuel subsidies. And we need to restructure and cancel debt and all the other larger financial misdirected flows that are happening. But that, of course, cannot distract from the core provision of public finance. We have some reference in there to the loss and damage fund, and people might know that at the first day of the COP, we agreed on a loss and damage fund. But, and this is the very unsatisfactory reference there, all finance provision to the loss and damage fund is strictly voluntary, including by developed countries, and that is simply not enough. We have not actually gotten enough commitments to really have confidence that we can scale up quickly, provide the money that is needed for particularly affected communities, those on the front line that are already suffering devastating loss and damage. And so we definitely need to ensure that the obligation of developed country for finance provision is not further undermined with the text as it comes out here. So again, not everything is lost yet. We are certainly fighting. We want to make sure that there is a phase out of fossil fuel subsidies. Right now in the language, there is some reference to phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. That's obviously not strong enough. There is also not enough strong text in there to ensuring that the finance is there for the just part in the energy transition. Again, there is some language on the energy package, but a lot of the accompanying social system support that needs to be public finance is not strongly underlined. And yeah, we need to fight more. One thing I want to mention, and I'm not quite sure whether Catherine has already mentioned it overall. Overall, the text is very, very weak with references on human rights, on gender responsiveness, on the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And what is particularly missing are strong references there to the respective provision of finance in a way that is human rights centered, that is gender responsive, that is prioritizing local communities. So again, we haven't given up the fight yet, but we would like at this stage really like to see a lot stronger references and text than what we are seeing right now. And sorry if that's all a little bit convoluted. I've just peered over texts and paragraphs of very dense negotiation language to try to really figure out what it means, how can we improve it, and whether there is hope in the text. And yeah, all I can say is we need to continue fighting. That's not the text that we need, that's not the text that we want, and that's not the text that the world and affected communities and people deserve. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and for your hard work and the late nights to really work to improve this text. And, you know, the fight is not over. I mean, this is the first we've seen of it. We're seeing huge pushback by Oasis. And, you know, we need to be here to support these countries that are fighting back and to continue with civil society and make as many interventions and actions as we can over the next days, because it's really unacceptable what has happened here. Did we lose Leanne? Oh, something happened. Oh, there you are. Sorry. You disappeared on me. It's okay. It's quite late. And I know we're all working to have this conversation. Just suddenly it disappeared. So, you know, I think that, you know, we should not give up our hope and we should not give up our fight. And I think it's also important to say that this is not the only space where we can fight for what it is that we need to have happen in our communities around the just transition, around financing. I think that it's important always to have perspective on these COPs, that this is one space we're fighting in. It's a critical space, but there's a lot of work that we can do in our communities and in our own countries and at the subnational level that also can be quite powerful, because I've spoken to a lot of parliamentarians since I've been here, and at a subnational level, there is a lot going on. And I just didn't want to give a lot of our listeners like be completely devastated that what these outcomes are going to produce at this COP are the end of the story. They're not. There's a lot more that we can do, and we're going to keep fighting while we're here to improve the text as best as we can. And it's one piece of an ecosystem of activities that needs to happen. And I wanted to, before you go, Leanne, and it's going to take one more minute of your time because I know we've got work to do tonight, is we were together at the plenary today, the People's Plenary, and every year, at some point in the COP, all the constituencies get together and have a huge plenary with all of civil society. And it was quite moving to come from that space today and feel our collective power and our collective demands. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to get just any reflection, if you would like, around your experience of the plenary today, just to give a flavor also of what civil society is doing here in our demands, and anything that struck you from that moment today.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Osprey, I think that was actually the assembly, I think, came at the right time for a lot of us, because you had pointed out, and I'm pretty sure other speakers had probably reiterated that as well, how difficult it really has been during that COP to gain access, how often we were excluded from the rooms, how often it felt like, you're really fighting against forces that are so much more powerful. I'm pretty sure you've mentioned the very well-funded fossil fuel lobby. And the People's Assembly was really one spot where you could feel the collective power and the collective commitment across constituencies, the very strong leadership that comes particularly also from young people. And I was struck, in the presentations there of the speakers on the panel, how many of them, across the constituencies, the women and gender constituencies, obviously the youth constituencies, but the indigenous people constituency, were actually young women that were putting forward really powerful demands that resonated with the whole room. I mean, it is a gigantic-enormous room, the plenary. I don't know how many hundreds of people or thousands of people were there. And it was just really a collective empowerment and soul nourishment. I think that's what a lot of us felt coming out there. I know there was a lot of crying, there was a lot of hugging, there was a lot of feeling the collective solidarity and the strengths that we are drawing from being with each other and knowing that we are fighting together for the improvements. And I mean, again, I'm not a person that is very, very well versed in kind of expressing emotions, but it was very emotional. And again, it was nurturing. It's exactly kind of the support that we needed for the end fight here for the last days and hours in Dubai.
Yes, I completely agree. It was the perfect time to give us the energy for these last days and really to feel our collective power and to understand what it feels like to be in a room with that level of care and commitment, which is not what we're experiencing from governments and from wealthy countries. The heart, the expression from the young people, the calling out collectively for a ceasefire, the understanding of the interconnectedness of our struggles. I think it was quite a profound moment, and people are listening in. You can go to the UNFCCC website and see it's all been recorded. And if you want to get a flavor of what it feels like to see civil society in action, and the passion and the dedication is really enough to take the roof off, quite honestly. A lot of energy and deep commitment from people all over the world, from all different backgrounds, with all different ideas, but collectively making these demands together is really quite something to experience. So Leanne, I'm going to let you go. I'm sure you're going to dig back into the text, and I'm going to meet you up later for maybe a meal if we can get that late tonight. And thank you so much for taking your time with us and all your incredible hard work and expertise. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. Best of luck. Bye.
Bye. Ashley, I'm looking to you to let me know if I should continue on or if we have another speaker here.
Yan was our last speaker, and we so appreciate that she was able to join us. Yeah, we can close out anytime.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and close out. This was, we had about at least 5 or 6 different speakers from different regions. But again, this live stream was planned, and it just circumstantially happened that the text came out literally right before I jumped on. And so people are in different meeting rooms. People have been pulled off to work with their constituencies because now that the text is out, everyone is in the mode of digging into the text and figuring out what we're going to do or organizing actions. And so we're very thankful to all of the speakers who were able to join us this evening. And you'll be hearing more from different of the delegation members that WECAN brought, as well as hearing from many stories from women from all over the world that we will be sharing in our blog and our different videos. For now, I would also suggest people go to our Instagram and Facebook site because we have enormous amounts of information that we've already shared, reports, videos, different actions. We have recorded our press conferences. We have live streamed our side events. And so there's just a plethora of information that you can get to on our social media platforms. And then, as I say, we'll be doing a full analysis in a blog that will be coming out, next week. But right now we're just, we're still in it. I'm going to go try to get some food and then probably head over to an action planning session and then dig into the text with Leanne and some others. I don't want people to give up hope. We still need your energy. We're not done here. We're going to try to make this text the absolute best it can be. And we are very clear that we are privileged to be here. Everyone here realizes we are the ones standing here, and behind us is our communities, our indigenous relatives, our Black and brown sisters and brothers, our sisters and brothers in Palestine, our sisters and brothers in the global South. And we don't want to forget anyone. We bring everyone with us, and we know that we're the ones that are here, and it is a privilege to be here. And we are doing everything we can to ensure that we represent and that we fight as hard as we can for the global community. We deserve the best. And so does our beautiful Mother Earth and all the plants and animal relatives and all of nature. We are fighting for the web of life. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out. We thank everyone for joining us, and we'll continue to, yes, Ashley, did you?
We have, Osprey, can you hear me?
Yes.
We have patients on the line.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Can you hear us?
I don't hear patients.
Sorry, 1 second. I see the audio is coming in and out. Let's just give it another couple seconds here. Patients, if you're able to hear us, please unmute yourself and we'll see if we can hear you.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. My internet is really bad. I've been trying to start, but it has been failing. I'm so sorry for this.
Don't worry. We're just really honored that you could join us. Thank you. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself and share your organization and any reflections? We've just been having different colleagues jump on and share any reflections from the COP. If you'd like to go ahead and do that, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us, and don't worry about the connection. We can hear you fine.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Patience Nabukalu. I'm a climate justice activist from Uganda, working with Fridays for Future Uganda. I'm so passionate about achieving climate justice, human rights, and environmental rights. I'm the lead campaigner for Stop Wetland Degradation, and I'm the founder of the Stop Wetland Degradation. And also the past 4 to 3 years, I've been campaigning against WECAN crude oil pipeline. This is a total project that is yet to be constructed in my country. And it is called the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. It will be the longest heated oil pipeline in the whole world once constructed, which runs over 1,443 kilometers from northern part of Uganda down to Tanzania and to the Indian Ocean. So we've been like really against it because it's a climate bomb in the making. When you look at my country, it's one of the vulnerable countries when it comes to climate change, and it is yet to suffer from such a climate bomb in the making that will emit 34 million tons of carbon emissions. It's a threat to our biodiversity, ecosystems, and aquatic life. It is so I've been like really so much against this with collaborations from friends around the world, our organizations, Western NGOs, and yes, we have seen a lot of impact, and we believe activism works because we have seen 27 banks pulling out of the East African crude oil pipeline, and over 23 insurance companies are ruling out from insuring the East African crude oil pipeline. Well, yes, I'm at COP. I hope I'm not talking a lot of things. Yes.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm in Dubai for COP 28, sorry, not 27, 28. And sorry, even before like coming to COP, I wasn't optimistic about the future from COP. And also, as it has always been, leaders are continuing to fail us. We fight, we go like on front lines. Very many activists around the world are risking their lives, are risking their families to come here and also like to advocate for climate justice. But it's really sad when we come to such spaces. Some actually fail on even coming because of lack of resources to be a part of this COP. And also, we really find hard times. Some are here and we don't have what to feed on. We are just hoping for the better because we come here. But it's really unfortunate that leaders are continuing to put all our energy in vain and are really like against the real goal we really want, and are ready to snatch our future from us. When you look at what is happening at COP28, where it has hosted over 2,000 fossil fuel lobbyists, and yet the science is so clear that we cannot risk to have more new oil and gas projects if we are to achieve the 1.5 degrees target. And also, when you look at the devastating impacts of climate change, this year, June and August has been ranked one of the hottest months in the whole decades, and still leaders are continuing to push the fossil fuel goals, pledging for solutions for 2030, 2050, and yet people are dying now. We should have solutions now, not targets for 2030, 2050. And also, when you look at the loss and damage that has been caused to the global south, to the vulnerable countries when it comes to the climate crisis, it's really so sad when you look at what is happening in the pledge box right now at COP28. Countries that have escalated the climate breakdown are failing still to pledge, actually not even pledging, because I feel like pledging is leading us to false solutions. They should just deliver the money. Because when you look at US coming up with 17.5 million, this is like a diss to countries like ours. It's like they're dissing us. And when you look at the millions that are pledged, they're like over 400 million. And this is like a drop in an ocean. Very many people are disappointed, and we just don't have hope in this COP because this COP has not been put into account and yet leaders have to make it account. I don't know if I'm getting so emotional when it comes to talking about what is happening at COP. It is really heartening. And as a woman, as a girl who has risked her life, when all of this year, when you have been like against the East African crude oil pipeline, it has risked my life to a point that I've been threatened by my government. I've been threatened by very many politicians. Very many of our people have been detained and arrested. And when we come to such conferences where we have to have real transition plans, it is always a heartbreak. So I don't know, but COP is it has been, to me, it is like a business center where people have come to settle business deals. Rich people sit in meetings and discuss which land to grab, where to put new fossil fuels, which country to exploit, and so many other things. Yeah, so I really don't have hope in COP. Loss and damage fund, yes, it was on the agenda, but I don't think like money can replace the dead people who have died of the impacts of climate change. I don't know if money can bring back the lost property that had, because when you look at, every time I refer to this East African crude oil pipeline, it has displaced over 100,000 people from their lands. It has displaced over 100 people from their lands. Children are no longer going to school. People are no longer have nowhere to feed, because some used to depend on Lake Victoria, where they could carry out fishing and other things. But because of the greed for profits from the French company Total, these people can no longer survive. And when you look at what is happening around the world, every day you see a country flooded. Every time you see a war around the world. And all this is unjust. If we are talking about climate justice, we cannot achieve it without human rights. We cannot achieve climate justice without social rights. We cannot achieve climate justice without including the affected people into decision-making tables. And also, we cannot have the climate justice we claim when people are continuing not to have hearts and love for people. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patience, for your very powerful presentation and words and intervention here. And I send you heartfelt greetings. I really understand your words and hear you, and it has been extremely disappointing. And thank you for your hard work here this week, and all the effort you put out. And I think it's really important to hear, as you mentioned, the great risk that you personally have made in coming here, along with others as well. And it is not an equitable situation in any regard. And everyone comes here in different ways, and it's not even at all. And I think it's very important for people to understand, as you shared with us, the risks that some land defenders are taking to show up in these spaces and the threats that you face. And I want you to know that we hear you and we support you and we stand with you in solidarity. And, also just to echo what you said around the Loss and Damage Fund, the Fund for Adaptation, and just the absolute insanity of how small these numbers are in comparison to the kinds of funds that are needed by wealthy countries for countries in the global south, more vulnerable countries, make the transition, and that the funds are needed and they're not there, and the promises are there, but the funds are not there. The pledges are there, but the funds are not there. And it's very harmful, it's very hurtful. But we are going to keep fighting, and also to know that we stand with you in solidarity. And this is not the only space that we have to work together as a global community, because it is people's movements that are going to make this change. We can see you for the first time. Your video came through. Good to see your face. But thank you so much for joining us. And I wish you all the best for the rest of your COP. And to be sure, we will be here, to improve the very weak text that we received. We are going to continue to do everything we can to ensure that there is better outcomes for loss and damage, that we do see Indigenous rights and human rights and our humanity be put back into this process. I wish you well. Thank you so much, Patience, for being with us, and know that we stand with you in solidarity. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you too for hosting today. I'm really sorry for being late, but
it's
very hearing
no
from the negative COP, and then yeah.
We understand, and we're just thankful you were able to jump on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ashley, back to you.
Well, on that note, this Patience was our last and final speaker, and we are so grateful to all the speakers who were able to join us tonight and give their powerful report outs and testimonies. Osprey, I leave it to you to close us out.
Okay, great. Thank you for listening. I think the final thing I wanted to say is, we wanted to feature, of course, for a women's organization, but it's very important because women are really leading out a lot of solutions. And we've seen that statistically on our website. You can see why we are a women's organization. The women here have been phenomenal. We are really struggling to have our voices heard. This is why we are so honored to work with the Women and Gender constituency, which is one of the most powerful constituencies here at the UNFCCC process. And I don't want to take too much longer because we still have a lot of work to do tonight. But just as one example, if you just have a 1 unit increase in the Women's Political Empowerment Index in a country, it leads to an 11.51% decrease in carbon emissions. Just to give you one stat on the role of how powerful women are when it comes to creating strong policies that are better for the environment, that are better for social issues, that care for the children. We saw this in the COVID pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, the country leaders who did the best in supporting their countries and their communities and their populations around COVID were women leaders. And I could go on and on why we need to have women's leadership and the lack of balance, of gender balance here at these COPs. And I did want to mention that there are 133 heads of state at this particular COP. Only 15 of them are women heads of state. And we know that women are key to being leaders in their communities and the kinds of outcomes economically, socially, and the improvements that happen when women are leading the way. And we really need to change this power imbalance, because what we're seeing is a hyper-masculinized power structure here. Let's face that. It's very, very important to understand that. And we need to create the power of the matriarchs returning, the power of the women, and feminist solutions, and a feminist economy. And we have a deep analysis that WECAN has been engaged in with many women's leaders around the world. And there's a reason for this analysis, which is that women are instrumental to sustainability solutions. And in fact, you can't get to sustainability without the role of women, whether it's water solutions. UN has many studies that show you cannot even have these water programs in different countries if you don't involve women, because they're the one collecting the water. They have been studying the water cycles. They are caretakers of the water. Same around the food and who's growing the food for their communities. It's the women. And so it's essential that from the top level of parliaments to presidencies, that women's leadership is absolutely critical to the grassroots level, caring for communities and leading resistance movements. And so I just wanted to end on that note of lifting up women's voices and why we are working so hard to bring women's voices to these spaces, and to also be demanding from the UNFCCC that they start having more COP presidencies that are women, and that we have more heads of state of women here. It won't resolve everything, but it will be a huge paradigm shift if we can get women's leadership into these spaces and really sharing the knowledge that they have, the brilliance that they have, the care that they have, their understanding of community needs. It will create a revolution in these spaces, and we really need that. So I'm thankful to all of the women who joined us tonight. Thank you to our audience for joining us. I hope this has been useful to you, and just getting some raw reflections here from COP28 in Dubai. And be sure to catch up on our blog next week when we give you a full analysis and report back from all of the different work streams that have happened here. And I want to thank my team, Catherine Quaid, who is on for a little while, who's been on the ground with me, Ashley Guardardo for holding it down here. And Sophia Lovato, I think, is still on the line with us, making sure that we have our technology in order, and to thank everyone. And we're going to go ahead and sign out for the night. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.